Preface of Your Psychic Powers and How to Develop Them. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. Your Psychic Powers and How to Develop Them by Hereward Carrington. Preface. The following book, Your Psychic Powers and How to Develop Them, was originally written for circulation semi-privately among the members of a number of psychical and spiritualistic societies in New York and vicinity, and is for that reason decidedly positive and spiritualistic in tone. It states facts dogmatically, and does not attempt to defend the statements made by any show of argument. The reader is asked to bear in mind throughout the following: 1. That the present work does not necessarily represent my own views in all respects, but rather the teachings which are generally accepted regarding the facts. That is to say, I have merely endeavored to state the traditional and accepted theories, without in all cases endorsing these views myself. 2. For this reason, those who might be apt to criticize certain views advanced in this book, and brand them as rankly credulous, quacky, or spiritualistic, are hereby warned that they are deprived of that weapon, for the simple reason that, as before said, the teachings put forward do not in every case represent my own views, but the traditional and accepted ones, which are more or less prevalent in psychical and spiritualistic circles. And I have been careful in nearly all such cases to state that it is taught, or we are told, or words to that effect. I have summarized these teachings, and the reader must use his own judgment in selecting those which appeal to his reason and common sense, while attempting to follow them, and while developing his own psychic powers. So much evidence has been accumulated of late years, tending to prove the persistence of individual human consciousness after death, and I have tentatively, and for the sake of argument, adopted the spiritualistic hypothesis throughout the present work. I have assumed that a spiritual world exists, and that it is possible at certain times and under certain conditions to get into touch with that world through the instrumentality of certain peculiarly endowed individuals known as psychics or mediums. The fact once granted, innumerable interesting possibilities present themselves, as well as many phenomena which call for solution. I have endeavored in this present volume to offer tentative theories and explanations of such facts, and to make plain what might conceivably happen, once the main theory were accepted. It is with these thoughts in mind that I have spoken of spirits throughout as actually existing and communicating. This, at least, is the appearance of the phenomena. Psychical research seems to be tending more and more towards an acceptance of the spiritualistic interpretation of the facts, and it is because of this, and with the possibility of the ultimate acceptance of this interpretation, that I have adopted throughout the present volume, tentatively, as before said, and for the sake of argument, the correctness of the spiritualistic view, and have proceeded throughout upon this assumption. Whatever the ultimate interpretation of the phenomena may prove to be, this is, it seems to me, at least warranted by the newer researches and conclusions in this field. It must be distinctly understood, however, that I believe the vast bulk of the material contained in this book to be sound and helpful. The practical instructions are good, and the reader cannot go far wrong in following them. I, at least, wish his success in his efforts. May he develop his own psychic powers, and gain light and understanding thereby. H.C. End of preface.
Chapter 1. Of your psychic powers and how to develop them. Your psychic powers and how to develop them. By Hereward Carrington. Chapter 1. How to develop. Every student of psychics, everyone who has experienced phenomena of one kind or another, or who is more or less mediumistic, desires to know how to develop his own powers and faculties so that the phenomena which come through him may be increased in power, in clearness, and in excellence. It is quite possible to ensure this, since we are all more or less mediumistic or psychic, and need only to cultivate our powers in order to develop them and bring them into maturity. Development may differ according to the character of the phenomena we desire. Those who desire physical phenomena must develop in one way. Those who desire to obtain automatic writing must develop in another. And those who wish to become clairvoyant must develop in still another, and so on. Spontaneous phenomena. To begin, let me give a few general hints to those who have experienced spontaneous phenomena in their waking state, or who have experienced remarkable dreams, which they feel signify something, but just what they do not understand. These spontaneous phenomena are often the simplest types of mediumship, though as a matter of fact, they are also an indication of psychic power, having but little to do with true mediumistic messages. That is, they are the result of remarkable powers within ourselves. All who obtain phenomena of this nature should make it a point, first of all, to maintain the physical health at the highest possible standard, so that the energies are not drained, and the body remains healthy and the mind clear in its judgment. It is essential to reduce the amount of stimulants which may be taken to the lowest possible quantity, or, if possible, omit them altogether. This applies not only to alcohol in all its forms, but also to tea and coffee. These stimulants excite the nerves and the imagination, and often induce manifestations which are not true psychic phenomena at all, but merely the results of a disordered nervous system. The subject should not eat too much meat. On the other hand, fruits of all kinds, particularly acid fruits such as the pear, peach, plum, orange, and lemon, are especially suitable, since the juices of these fruits act upon the liver and tend to cleanse the blood. Of course, these precautions are only for those who are serious in their study, and who are determined to obtain the best possible phenomena. The mind should be exercised in all healthy channels. Do not introspect or reflect too much on your own inner mental conditions. You must learn to live outside of your head, so to speak, in the outer world. Do not constantly wonder what is going on within your own brain. If you do, you will surely lead yourself into difficulties later on. In short, you should lead a healthy, active life, and between those times when you experience phenomena, you should think about them as applied to yourself as little as possible. Conditions for development. If you desire to obtain certain manifestations, it is not advisable to sit for them or try to obtain them for longer than 20 minutes to half an hour each day. At first, 5 or 10 minutes would suffice, and this time can gradually be lengthened as you progress. This is especially important, and the neglect of this rule is one of the great reasons for the dangers which mediums experience later on in their development. Suppose, for example, that someone appeared to you and gave you certain advice as to your course of action. It would certainly be unwise for you to follow this advice in every case without inquiring whether or not it would be just and sensible, and without using your own judgment when the advice was given. Even supposing that the person who appeared to you were really the spirit it claimed to be, there is always the possibility that this spirit may be mistaken, and the further possibility that some malicious and lying spirit is coming to you pretending to give advice, while in reality it was only leading you astray. There is this further possibility that the figure you saw was not really a spirit at all, but merely the product of your own subconscious imagination. Often this is the case, and yet the figure has given true and sound advice. All that we are saying now is that the judgment of the individual who receives such messages or advice must always be exercised upon the message received. If you do not cultivate this habit, you will find that messages often become more and more insistent when they are not followed, and will sometimes give untrue or lying information. They may even urge you to do certain things which are against your own welfare. All this can only be settled by the exercise of right judgment, and by the advice of those who know how much to believe in the messages. It is for this reason that the counsel and help of one who has had long training and experience in this subject is most desirable during these early stages of mediumship. The proper formation of the circle. The proper formation of the circle is of the utmost importance, and upon it depends the excellence of the phenomena, and whether or not helpful personalities are drawn into your aura and environment. The best results may be obtained by closely obeying the following rules. From 6 to 10 persons usually constitute a circle. They should range on the average from 20 to 50 years of age. Of these, half should be gentlemen and half ladies. They should sit alternately around a table, or around the room in the case one of the party enters the cabinet. It is desirable to join hands in order to form a battery, so-called, and the feet should be kept flat on the floor. The circle should not last more than 2 hours, and not less than half an hour. An invocation or short, earnest prayer should begin the proceedings, followed by slow and quiet music, which may or may not be accompanied by singing, according to the expressed wish of the controls, or the experience of those forming the circle. The light should be subdued, but absolute darkness should not be permitted, unless strict instructions are given to that effect. Avoid dark seances, if possible, at all times. The value of flowers. It is advisable to have flowers in the seance room whenever possible, as their presence is said to attract spirits in a peculiar manner. The spirits say that these flowers are lights. Plenty of fresh air should be allowed to enter the seance room. If any member of the circle be ill, he or she should not be permitted to sit in the circle until well again. A developing circle should meet in the same room, since this room tends to become mediumized or soaked in the magnetic influences given off by the sitters. The chairs on which the members of the circle sit should be wood or cane-bottomed. The use of upholstered chairs is generally inadvisable. The table round which the members of the circle sit should be free from metal. The chair on which the medium sits must be cane or wood, and, as already said, free from all cushions or upholstery. Atmospheric conditions. Atmospheric changes play a great and important part in all mediumistic conditions. The drier the atmosphere, the better the phenomena as a rule. On damp, rainy days, little can be obtained. During a thunderstorm, startling phenomena occasionally take place. High, rarefied air is better than that of lower levels, and for that reason a house on the side or even the top of a high mountain should be selected, if possible, in which to hold seances. Failing this, select a house which has as high an altitude as possible. One member of the circle must, by universal consent, undertake to conduct the proceedings, to converse with the spirits when they appear, to arrange the sitters in their proper places, to adjust the amount of light required, etc. His word must be followed at once, and without question, otherwise the necessary harmony will be destroyed, and the circle will fail to obtain as good results. excitement in all its forms should be avoided. If one in the circle developed mediumistic power, he should be placed next to a more fully developed medium, unless instructions are given not to do so. In this way, the power is concentrated and focused at one point. Misuse of spirit advice. Never attempt to use psychic power for worldly purposes. If you do, you will invite mischievous and lying intelligences to your circle, and the medium will possibly lose what mediumship he already possesses. Do not sit too frequently. Every other night at most, should sittings be held, or even twice a week. See that the room is not too cool, and is not unduly heated. As soon as the first manifestations have been received, encourage the spirits by talking to them in a natural tone or voice, as you would if they were visibly present in the room. Speak to them as you would if they had returned to earth in bodily form. Be natural, in fact. You will get the best results this way. Many of those who are interested in spiritualism are so situated that they cannot join circles but wish to develop alone. This is as a rule unwise, unless someone is present who understands the phenomena which are likely to develop and who can help and give good advice when required. You may do so if the following instructions are kept carefully in mind. If you can provide yourself with a cabinet, it would be very advisable to do so. Sit inside the cabinet on a comfortable chair and relax yourself thoroughly. Note whatever impressions come to you. Pay particular attention to your bodily feelings, no less than your mental states. Do not exaggerate here, or let your imagination have too free play. If your legs should happen to tingle, or the chair to creak, do not put these down to spiritual influence. They may be due to perfectly normal causes. Symptoms of oncoming mediumship. For the first few evenings, you will possibly notice nothing much of interest, although very psychic persons begin to develop almost at once. A peculiar lightness and buzzing is sometimes experienced in the head, together with a sense of numbness in the hands and arms, and sometimes in the feet and legs. The respiration seems to become slower, and so does the heart. Tiny lights and spots in light, or dark spots, appear in the air at a distance of 1 to 2 feet in front of the subject. A peculiar pressure is sometimes experienced on the top of the head, or on the base of the brain, or in the solar plexus. Swishing sounds, as of the sea breaking upon the seashore, may be heard, and a sensation that something inside the head is going round and round in spirals. The head, the hands, and sometimes the whole body break out into a profuse perspiration at this point. These are the first sensations of oncoming mediumship. Very often, they are not pleasant for the first few weeks, but if this period be passed, the unpleasant sensations will, as a rule, vanish, and the subject will then develop true mediumship of one character or another, getting the best results. Just here, it is advisable to state that the would-be medium should not at first sit for the express purpose of cultivating any particular phase of mediumship. He may desire to obtain materialization, but unless he is naturally endowed in this matter, he might sit forever and obtain nothing. Whereas, if he developed whatever phenomena presented themselves, he might very soon develop into a striking medium in some other line. To return, however, to the early development of mediumship. Soon after these early impressions have been noticed, the subject may note for the first time that his mind is peculiarly susceptible to influences of all kinds. He feels as if his mind has been skinned, so to speak, and that he is now exposed to the psychic breezes from every direction. He may become erratic and irritable and develop moods which he himself cannot understand. Peculiar buzzings in the head are sometimes heard. Sometimes cloud-like masses seem to form in space before him, twisting and turning and moving up and down and round about in very irregular motion. As a rule, these clouds appear to be of the consistency of vapor, though they may in time become more and more solid, until they become built up into definite forms. Of this, however, later. Early signs and experiences. At this phase of the development, the subject may feel cool breezes blowing upon his hands and face from various directions, breezes which appear to be perfectly physical in character. He may also experience a peculiar sticky sensation on his hands and face, as though cobwebs were applied over the bare skin which is exposed. This cobwebby sensation is very common, and is not limited, as many think, to mediums who obtain materialization. Colors and voices. In the early stage of the development, mediums very often see colors of various shades and hues in space before them. They are unable to tell whether or not these colors have any definite shape or outline. They seem to possess an odd, irregular shape of their own, something like a large blot of ink. At this stage, also, many psychics see faces of friends and relatives, either living or dead, just as they are falling asleep or as they are awakening in the morning, usually the former. They also see many strange faces. These may be mere vague images, or clearly outlined. Instead of the faces, they may hear voices speaking, and the first thing which these voices generally say is the name of the subject himself. After this, the voices may become more and more clear and intense, but such phenomena should be permitted only at stated times, because if they are allowed to develop whenever they may be experienced, trouble may result. Many odd and grotesque figures and shapes may present themselves to the mind's eye at this stage of development. These shapes may be highly colored, or may be almost colorless, seeming to be made of the air itself, yet somehow separated from this in outline. Many of these images are symbolic, though as a rule, a few of them are recognizable. More often, they represent curious patterns and figures, such as roses, circles, outlines of patterns, such as may be seen on the wallpaper, and occasionally weird and horrible images flash into the mind, to be gone again in the next instant. Unpleasant experiences. If these manifestations develop an unpleasant character at the time, they should be checked instantly. The subject may do this in several ways. First of all, he should build up his physical health. Second, he should see to it that he obtains plenty of sleep. Third, he should exercise his brain as little as possible on anything of this unpleasant character. Fourth, he should keep busily occupied in material, practical things, and leave himself no time to ponder and dwell upon these unpleasant experiences. Fifth, he should avoid by all means daydreaming and never allow his mind to become passive or absent-minded. He should cultivate his objective attention and interest, in short, and focus his whole personality, as it were, between his eyes, so as to have it under thorough control. If he does this, and refuses to sit for development for a short time, he will find that these early unpleasant symptoms, should they develop, will soon wear off. And this advice holds good for any stage in the development of mediumship. Exaggeration and imagination. Many of those who develop psychic phenomena are inclined to exaggerate the importance of the manifestations they receive during the early stages of their mediumship. Everything seems so new and strange to them, so remarkable, so unaccountable, so beyond the experience of the average person, that they feel bound to tell it to everyone they meet, and usually it loses nothing in the telling. They fail to realize that every medium who has been developed has gone through these same early stages, but has progressed beyond them years before. In observing these phenomena in yourself, you must be very careful to distinguish between the facts which really occur and the fantasies of your own excited imagination, which is inclined to extend and amplify these facts beyond all recognition. Thus, suppose a blurred outline of a face presents itself to you. The next day, you meet your cousin on the street. You instantly come to the conclusion that the face you saw was that of your cousin, while as a matter of fact, it might not have borne the least resemblance to him. This is a very simple case, but will serve to explain the point in question. Why and how your power may be lost. If you obtain such phenomena, you must be very careful not to exaggerate them, for if you do, you will quite possibly lose the real sensitiveness that you are beginning to acquire, and this will be replaced by the products of an overexcited imagination. This is a truth well known, as you may see by the following quotation from a work which appeared in 1813 entitled Animal Magnetism by Deleuze. For in it he says, quote, "Do not press the somnambulist too much, for if you do, you will gain nothing. You will even lose the advantages which you might derive from his lucidity. It is possible that you could make him speak upon all the subjects of your personal curiosity, but in that case you will make him leave his own sphere and introduce him in yours. He will no longer have any other resources than yourself. He will utter to you very eloquent discourses, but they will be no more dictated by the external inspirations. They will be the product of his recollections or of his imagination. Perhaps you will also rouse his vanity, and then all is lost. He will not re-enter the circle from which he has wandered. The two states cannot be confounded." End quote. The student who cultivates mediumship should, therefore, be careful to preserve a clear head and a modest estimate of his own phenomena. If he does, he will doubtless progress rapidly and favorably. End of Chapter 1.
Chapter 2 of Your Psychic Powers and How to Develop Them. Your Psychic Powers and How to Develop Them by Hereward Carrington. Chapter 2 Harmonious Conditions. If we exert ourselves in any way whatever, we desire certain conditions in order to bring our powers and faculties into play to the best advantage. If we are undertaking to perform any feat of physical strength, of intellectual or spiritual achievement, we desire to be free from care and worry, distraction and irritation, to be enabled to center and focus the whole of our energy in the channel desired. It is the same with mediumship. Conditions for the exercise of psychic powers. Professor Flerney of Geneva writes in this connection, quote, "As to the influence of various physical and mental conditions upon the exercise of mediumship, my correspondents are unanimous in condemning as absolute hindrances, or at least grave obstacles to the production of phenomena, all such causes as physical exhaustion, disturbing emotions, uneasiness, absorbing thoughts, fatigue, enervation, etc. The conditions required for the successful exercise of mediumistic powers are the same as for the voluntary exercise of any other power. A state of good health, nervous equilibrium, calm, the absence of care, good humor, sympathetic surroundings, etc. Many insist upon moral elevation, purity of conduct, noble aspirations, altruism, etc., saying that these things strengthen mediumship, while the lower sentiments, such as cupidity, pride, jealousy, etc., are the cause of much loss of power. Others have insisted that certain physical conditions have a propitious effect: silence, semi-obscurity, good ventilation, fasting, etc." End quote. Necessity for conditions. Those who do not understand the laws of spiritualism have contended that the conditions demanded by mediums are often absurd, for the reason that they permit trickery. If the conditions permit the practice of fraud, they should not be allowed. Beyond this, any conditions required by the medium should be granted, for the medium alone is the one to know what these conditions should be. Mediumship, doubtless, has its conditions, its own psychic laws, just as any other exercise of the inner powers. Many skeptics do not see this. They say, if you can produce these phenomena, you must be able to produce them at any time, just as we can always produce the same effects in a chemical or physical laboratory. Why all this fuss about conditions, etc.? But they fail to take into consideration human nature and the fact that psychic laws and physical laws are different. We can easily prove this. Conditions in art. Take any musical composer, or any artist who paints, and seat him at a table with instructions to compose a sonata or paint a wonderful picture within half an hour. Suppose that during all the time the work is in progress, noise and flurry is constantly going on in the same room. The desk at which the artist works is being shaken, children are continually running in and out of the room, etc. Do you think that, under such conditions, a masterpiece in either music or art could be produced? Could a poet compose a sonnet under such conditions? Certainly he could not. The exercise of mediumistic power is assuredly as delicate, as subtle, as refined, as easily disturbed, as any of these productions of the genius of man. How absurd, therefore, to pretend or contend that mediums should be able to exercise their powers whenever they want them, under any conditions, and to contend further that if they fail to do so, they are therefore frauds and humbugs. For the successful exercise of mediumship or psychic power in any direction, the essentials which have been mentioned above must be fulfilled, as well as any others which the medium may feel are required. These must by all means be granted, for if they are not, it is highly probable that no phenomena at all will be obtained. Harmony all important. Harmony is the keynote of successful mediumship, harmony of physical, mental, and spiritual life. This is only carrying to its logical conclusion what we observe every day all around us. Have we not all felt, immediately upon meeting certain persons, that they were attractive or repellent to us? We felt either drawn or repulsed inwardly, for no reason that we could define. Many theories have been advanced to explain this fact, but the most probable is that, surrounding each individual, there is an aura or psychic atmosphere which surrounds him like a halo or sheath, extending some distance outward from the body, and varying with the individual temperament, emotions, and the physical and mental health. If these auras are sympathetic, if they blend one with another, then we have attraction, leading in many cases to love at first sight. If the opposite conditions exist, we have instinctive dislikes, which are generally correct. As the poet said, "I do not like you, Dr. Fell. The reason why, I cannot tell." Mental harmony. Next to physical harmony comes mental harmony, and here is a wide field for observation and experiment. All spiritualists know that persons of certain temperaments must be excluded from serious circles, if the better class of phenomena are to be obtained. Such persons include the flippant, the arrogant, the unduly skeptical, the frivolous, etc. In addition to this, however, finer and more subtle points of mental harmony must be adjusted in our mental scales. It is advisable, whenever possible, to bring together persons having more or less the same point of view, interests, and sympathies. Sympathetic people always obtain better phenomena than the extremely intellectual ones. In the latter, the mind is, so to speak, hard, unyielding, and tends to build up a wall or barrier between itself and the medium, which it is difficult or even impossible for the latter to break through. We have known of several cases in which mediums were unable to obtain any results at all for individuals of the very intellectual and, so to speak, critical type of mind, whereas they could obtain an abundance of striking manifestations for the sympathetic and more congenial natures. Excessive gravity. At the same time, extreme gravity and seriousness on all occasions is to be avoided. Every person who investigates spiritualism should see to it that he preserves throughout his sense of humor, and his continued contact with and interest in the things of this world. If he does not do this, he is liable to become unduly swayed and overbalanced by the messages which are given to him, and by the startling and at first sight almost appalling fact that communication with the spirits of the departed has really been established. If he does not preserve his balance and common sense at such times, he is liable to become not only unduly credulous, but even to fly off the handle altogether, and his mind may in some instances actually become unhinged. Be careful, therefore, to keep the compartments of your mind watertight, as it were, and not allow your interest for the things spiritual to overflow and swamp your interest in things material. Spiritual harmony. Next we come to spiritual sympathy and harmony, which is perhaps most important of all in the formation of successful circles. This would include an interest in spiritual things, aspirations, benevolence, sympathy, a more or less religious turn of mind, tolerance, and the ability to see things from the standpoint of another, this being sympathy in its broadest sense. It is the blending together of a number of temperaments of this character which constitutes the successful circle. The reason for this harmony and delicate adjustment of conditions may be seen readily enough by a reference to the phenomena not only of the mental but of the physical world. For instance, if you set into vibration a tuning fork, this will emit a note of a certain pitch. Another tuning fork, distant many feet from the first, will instantly vibrate in unison if the two are attuned one to the other. But unless the tuning forks are adjusted at precisely the right pitch, they will not respond, and 1,000 tuning forks may be placed around the room, but none of them will respond in any way to the vibration of the first. This crude analogy, drawn from the physical world, will show us how essential harmony is, and if this be true in material phenomena, more certainly is it true in the mental and spiritual realms. Harmony and vibration. Every individual is said to vibrate at a certain rate. This is his own pitch, so to say, and no two human beings are alike. This definite rate of vibration doubtless corresponds to the personality of the individual, and, though no two can be absolutely alike, those who approximate each other the nearest would be the most sympathetic, and would be the most drawn one to the other. And if this is true of spirits incarnate here in this life, it is doubtless true when applied to the relations between our own spirits and the spirits of those who have passed over. There is an old saying that like attracts like. If the tone of the circle, and of the individuals composing it, is high, the aspirations elevated and pure, that circle will attract to it spirits from the other side having the same vibrations as itself. The circle will, in fact, only come in contact with good and not evil spirits. Certainly there are exceptions to every rule, but the above is the general law which may be stated in broad terms as true. For, were this not the case, we might contend that no such thing as justice existed in the universe, and that chance and not moral law held all in its sway. But we know that this is not the case, inasmuch as we feel assured in our heart of hearts that beauty, truth, and justice are the foundation stones upon which this universe is built. We might rightly suppose that this is in every case the truth, and that a circle formed by serious-minded investigators, having in view only the highest and best motives, would draw to them helpful and loving spirits from the great beyond, and the history of spiritualism proves this to be the fact. How to fit yourself for a circle. The method you should follow to fit yourself most effectually for becoming a member of one of these advanced circles is as follows. You should perfect and make as wholesome as possible the physical body in which you live. This is brought about by paying particular attention to the diet, and by taking an abundance of exercise, deep breathing, and frequent baths. Many spiritualists have become vegetarians with this object in view, and also non-smokers and abstainers from alcohol. Tea and coffee are also debarred in some quarters, but such strict measures are usually advised only for those who are striving for individual spiritual perfection, and need not necessarily be followed by one who is a member of a large circle. Of course, such measures cannot fail to benefit an individual in any case. The keystone of the arch. Cultivate cheerfulness, altruism, and a simple, wholesome point of view, banishing fear as you would the devil, and never allowing it for a moment to dominate or enter into you. Preserve a sane religious balance, and endeavor in any way possible to cultivate sympathy for the point of view of others, no matter how prejudiced and narrow it may be. Keep your mind lifted up, elevated, and, as Andrew Jackson Davis said, under all circumstances, keep an even mind. If you do not naturally possess it, cultivate an insight into things spiritual, and above all, true benevolence and sympathy. This is the keystone of the arch erected to and supporting self-perfection. End of Chapter 2.
Chapter 3 of Your Psychic Powers and How to Develop Them. Your Psychic Powers and How to Develop Them, by Hereward Carrington. Chapter 3 Fear and How to Banish It. We are our own greatest enemies. We create the majority of the ills from which we suffer. In psychic investigation, more people have suffered from fear than from any other depressing emotion. But in 9 cases out of 10, these fears have been perfectly groundless, and the subject has had all his fears and worry for nothing. He has crossed his bridges before coming to them. Were he to reflect for a moment, he would find that the terrible things he feared very rarely came to him, that the majority of the experiences which he actually went through were of such a nature that he needn't have feared them at all. Fear wrecks, faith saves. Fear is not only useless, for the reason that it prevents nothing, but it is actually harmful from this double standpoint. In the first place, it helps to induce the condition we are fearing. As Job said, "That which I greatly feared has come upon me." He thought about and dreaded certain conditions so much that he doubtless created them, while had he not done so they would never have come upon him. Professor William James gives us a very good illustration of the way in which fear sometimes brings about its own fulfillment. He says, "Suppose that, for example, I am climbing in the Alps, and have the ill luck to work myself into a position from which the only escape is by a terrible leap. Being without similar experience, I have no evidence of my ability to perform it successfully, but hope and confidence in myself make me sure that I shall not miss my aim, and nerve my feet to execute what without those subjective emotions would perhaps have been impossible. But suppose that on the contrary the emotions of fear and mistrust predominate, or suppose that I feel that it would be sinful to act upon an assumption unverified by previous experience, why then I shall hesitate so long that at last, exhausted and trembling, and launching myself in a moment of despair, I miss my foothold and roll into the abyss. In this case, and this is one of an immense class, the part of wisdom clearly is to believe what one desires, for the belief is one of the indispensable preliminary conditions for the realization of its object. There are then cases where faith creates its own verification. Believe and you shall be right, for you shall save yourself. Doubt and you shall again be right, for you shall perish. The only difference is that to believe is greatly to your advantage. The obvious lesson to be drawn from this is that you should not fear the unknown or unseen until you have had just cause to do so. If you do, it will predispose you to experience the very manifestations you most dread. Evil effects of fears upon the body. In the second place, fear has a destructive and depressing effect upon the body. It depletes the vitality, lowers the respiration, and doubly incapacitates you from performing any serious rational work, or carrying on any rational common sense train of thought. Fear, therefore, is certainly to be avoided, for it helps nobody and harms everybody. But, the reader may object, I cannot control my fear so easily. It is a thing beyond my power. I do not pursue fear. It pursues and overtakes me. To a certain extent this may be true. There are 2 kinds of fear, the unreasoning, instinctive fear, and the conscious, reflective fear. The former is a relic of our lowly ancestry, and is shared by all the higher animals. We cannot help that, but such fear, as a rule, is only momentary and is over in a few instants. We have the impulse to flee, etc., which demands immediate expression, but this instinctive fear may be overcome by the mind. Our reason tells us, upon second thought, that we have no cause to fear, and we stop abashed and ashamed of ourselves. This is not the fear which we have to correct, as a rule, since it is bodily rather than mental, and of short duration. The kind of fear to fear. The conscious, mental fear is that which bothers us and which we should learn to cure. We are sufficiently advanced in civilization and in the understanding of things spiritual to know that all is natural. Nothing is supernatural. Even if a spirit returns to us, that is a natural event, though it may not be a common or ordinary event, and for this reason we call it supernormal. But why should we be afraid of the spirit of a dearly beloved friend or relative, or even the spirit of a stranger coming to us in this way, any more than we should be afraid of it when coming to us in the flesh? It is the same spirit. In one case possessing a physical body, in the other case animating only an ethereal body. Of what is there to be afraid? Spirits are but human beings, such as ourselves. We are spirits here and now, just as much as we ever will be. Spirits are, in fact, human beings who have passed through a certain experience, called death. And as Professor Minot Savage says, they are just folks. Why, therefore, should we be afraid of them? The powers of darkness. We must school the mind to reflection, and by due exercise of the reason and the will, not to be afraid of such happenings, but rather to accept them and be thankful for them, and to treat them either as scientific happenings or as spiritual events of great significance and help. In either case there is truly no cause to fear. It is true that in the case of many persons, darkness brings with it a peculiar sense of dread, which is experienced by nearly all children, and which is to a certain extent shared by many animals. A dog will go to the door of a dark room, peer in, and slink away. Even insects often refuse to go into dark places. The cat alone seems to enjoy the uncanny sensation which accompanies darkness. And we know that cats are proverbial ghost lovers, while dogs are the reverse. It may be that there is more truth in this belief than many realize. We know that the orthodox devil was known as the king of the powers of darkness, and all evil things are associated with that state. On the other hand, Jesus was said to be the light of the world, and light always accompanied spiritual manifestations, as it does today. The expression made use of by Mr. Hamlin Garland some years ago in his book, The Tyranny of the Dark, may therefore have a certain foundation. There are perhaps principalities and powers which can operate more freely and fully in the dark than in the light, but only if they are allowed to do so by the fear and the attitude and mind of the person experiencing them. We remember that in Pilgrim's Progress the travelers were repeatedly warned that no harm could come to them so long as they faced their spiritual enemies. And we must remember the words of the greatest of all psychics, "Resist the devil and he will flee from thee." All we have to do, therefore, in order to prevent the domination of any evil thought or power is to fight it, resist it, meet it strongly and courageously with calmness and decision, and it will melt before your attack like dew before the rays of the morning sun. Evil emotions. Mr. Horace Fletcher, in his little book on Happiness, says some very good things regarding fear, which he defines as an expression of fear thought. Fear thought, according to this author, is the self-imposed or self-permitted suggestion of inferiority. It is both a cause and an effect of selfishness. It is the taproot of evil. The body is a mirror in which all states of the soul are reflected. Perhaps the most extensive of all the morbid mental conditions which reflect themselves so disastrously on the human system is the state of fear. Dr. Hack Tuke, in his book, The Influence of the Mind upon the Body, cites a number of well-authenticated instances of disease having been produced by fear or fright. Insanity, idiocy, paralysis of various muscles and organs, profuse perspiration, turning the hair gray in a short time, baldness, nervous shock followed by fatal anemia, malformation of the embryo, and even skin and other diseases, apparently more removed than these from the effects of the mind, were traced to the effects of fear and other mental disturbances. He pointed out also that epidemics such as cholera, smallpox, diphtheria, and other malignant diseases obtain a footing in a community largely through the fear of the inhabitants, and that hundreds and even thousands of persons fall victims to their own mental conditions. How fear causes sickness. How does fear operate upon the body to produce sickness? Largely by paralyzing the nerve centers, especially those of the vasomotor nerves, thus producing not only muscular relaxation, but capillary congestions of all kinds. It is an interesting fact that fear and all depressing emotions of a similar nature serve to constrict or contract the body, while mirth, love, altruism, and all the higher emotions serve to produce both physical and mental relaxation, opening up the mental and physiological doorways of the organism. The term "frightened to death" is not a mere expression, but is founded upon valid physiological and psychological laws. A Southern physician has reported an interesting case. It was that of a big burly Negro who supposed that he had been fatally shot. Fear had seized him with tremendous power. He shook like an aspen leaf. He bordered on the state of collapse, and death seemed imminent. Not finding any blood, the examining physician ordered all his clothes removed, and while he was being undressed, a flattened bullet fell upon the floor. The doctor exhibited the bullet to the frightened patient, explaining that he had had a miraculous escape, whereupon his circulation was immediately restored, his countenance improved, his temperature became normal, and the look of life returned to his eyes, which had been fixed with the gaze of death, while a broad grin crept over his face. The Negro got down from the operating table and dressed, apologized for the fuss he had caused, and walked home. Fear is contagious. Fear has the peculiar power of being extremely contagious. Under the proper conditions, fear manifested by one person is instantly communicated to the entire company. They feel little chills run up and down their spines, their hair begins to stand on end, and a cold perspiration breaks out here and there over the body. This shows the profound effect which this emotion has upon the bodily functions, and also how easily it may be acquired without reason. Fear has the power of almost stopping the heart, and paralyzing the entire nervous system. A peculiar fatigue is also caused by fear, as has been proved by delicate experiments. A natural and normal way to overcome fear, under such conditions, is to open the mind to natural faith and normal trust. Let the psychic forces be allied with faith and health. Let fear be finally and forever cast down and banished from the mental domain. This may often be brought about by reasoning, though an effort of will is generally necessary also. A determined opposition accompanied by trust, faith in wise protection, faith in your own powers, and in the help of friendly spiritual monitors, are of the greatest use and benefit in overcoming this great monster, fear. The fear of evil spirits. Many people are afraid of evil spirits, being alarmed lest they should influence them against their will, and cause them to do certain things which they would not normally care to do, even to the point of obsessing them. There is a real danger here to a certain extent, which will be dwelt upon and explained in the chapter on obsession, but let it be pointed out that the only way to prevent such things is to keep up a normal, healthful, resistant attitude of mind, and not to give way to fear, which would be doing the very thing to invite attack. Let us recall once more the words of Job in this connection. So long as the sea walls or dikes of Holland are sound and unimpaired, the ocean is kept within its proper limits and cannot break through and flood the land, as it sometimes does when these walls are destroyed. As we know, a tiny little hole through which the merest trickle of water can pass, will, unless repaired, soon become a wide crevice and then a roaring torrent. The most important thing to do is to check this in its inception, for it is easy to prevent the ingress of the water, if taken in time. Better still, it would be far easier to keep the sea walls in such repair that accidents of this kind would be impossible, for prevention is better than cure. Applying this to the case before us, we can see that the very first symptoms of fear must be checked as soon as they arise, for if they are allowed to continue, they will spread and work havoc in the mind, just as the waters would work havoc upon the land. The thing to do is to keep the mind so guarded, strengthened, and repaired by healthful exercise, intelligent cultivation, and control in the exercise of the will, that fear can never batter down its ramparts, and even should it attack the citadel of the mind, it would be quite unable to find a lodgment within this impregnable fortress. The fear of being hypnotized. What has been said applies also to the action of hypnotic influences, which many persons fear greatly. They are afraid of being hypnotized by some distant operator, and this fear sometimes becomes with them a veritable phobia, so that we occasionally find insane asylum patients who have become completely unhinged on account of this fear. We can see from this how useless, how exceedingly harmful fear of this character is, and it is more than useless, it is ridiculous. No one can be hypnotized against his own will by a distant operator in this way, as many suppose. If they feel influences of this character, these feelings are the result of their own disordered imagination, and are not due to any outside influence whatever. An individual really hypnotizes himself, the operator directing his own mental powers into certain channels so that this is brought about. If he resists the suggestion, as every one can do at first, it is impossible for any one to hypnotize him. Why such fears are groundless. The only way in which a person can be hypnotized from a distance is the following. If an operator has hypnotized his subject a great many times and repeatedly suggested to him, when in the hypnotic trance, that he is becoming more suggestible, that he can easily go off to sleep, that he has only to think of the operator in order to fall asleep, etc., he may succeed in making the subject so sensitive, after a certain length of time, that this condition is really brought about. The subject tends to fall into trance on the slightest provocation, but such cases are abnormal and are rarely met with, and, as I have just said, this condition cannot be brought about until the subject has been hypnotized several times and these suggestions given to him. These are well-known facts which any experienced hypnotist will sustain. This being so, it may readily be seen how absurd it is to fear telepathic suggestion from a distant operator, whom perhaps you have never seen. It is entirely illusory, and you need in reality have no fear whatever in this connection. The will, if exercised, is supreme. End of Chapter 3. Fear and how to banish it.
Chapter 4. Of Your Psychic Powers and How to Develop Them. Your Psychic Powers and How to Develop Them, by Hereward Carrington. Chapter 4. The Subconscious. In this chapter, I shall take up and try to make plain to the student the nature and functions of the subconscious mind. This is the greatest of all stumbling blocks to many spiritualists. Its possibilities, and at the same time its limitations, should be made clear to the student at the beginning of his studies. Otherwise, he is sure to get in trouble later on, not only with himself and with the phenomena he is studying, but with all persons who discuss these subjects with him and try to persuade him that the whole of spiritualism may be accounted for by the powers of the subconscious. What is the subconscious mind? First of all, what is the subconscious mind? We do not know exactly, but a great deal has been found out concerning it within the past quarter of a century. 20 years ago, when Thomson J. Hudson wrote his famous work, The Law of Psychic Phenomena, very little was known of the subconscious. Nearly everything which has been discovered about it has been learned since he wrote. His attitude is doubtless well known to the majority of my readers. It is that man has two minds, the conscious and the subconscious, or, as he preferred to express it, the objective and the subjective minds. The first of these is the conscious mind, the everyday reasoning mind. The second is that vast realm in which occur the phenomena of dreams, hypnotism, insanity, hysteria, clairvoyance, telepathy, and all kindred psychic phenomena. He placed the objective mind in the cerebrum, or fore part of the brain, and the subjective mind in the cerebellum, or hinder part of the brain. Two minds or one. But this dual conception of the mind is today given up by practically all psychologists. They admit that the mind is, in a certain sense, dual, but it is believed that both minds are in reality one, a part of which is conscious, and of the greater part, of which we know nothing. The analogy of the iceberg has often been used. A small percentage of this emerges above the water, and this we see and know, but the greater part of the mountain of ice is below the surface, and this we do not know through our senses. Yet it is all one iceberg. In the same way, there is only one mind, but when the searchlight of consciousness is turned upon certain areas, those areas become illuminated, and we know, or are conscious of, those parts. All else remains in the dim obscurity beyond, in the great storehouse of the subconscious mind. The powers of the subconscious. It may easily be proved that the subconscious mind acquires far more information, even through the senses, than does the conscious mind. The following simple experiment will prove this. Lead a person into a strange room, and ask him to observe as many things in it as he possibly can. Suppose he remains 5 seconds in that room. He is then quickly removed, and the door shut. If now he is asked to tell you all the things that he remembers having seen, he will probably be unable to remember 10 or 15 of them. But if you were to hypnotize that person, he would then describe to you, under hypnotic influence, 40 or 50 things which were in the room. This shows us that the subconscious mind, which we reached through hypnotism, has been able to perceive or take in many more things than the conscious mind. This happens to us every day. Dreams. It is the same with dreams. If, when out walking, we should happen to drop a brooch pin or a piece of money, we might be totally unconscious of the fact, but the subconscious mind would perceive and record it. That night, in sleep, we might have a dream in which a figure appeared to us and told us that the article had been lost, and that it would be found in such and such a place. On looking, the next morning, sure enough, there it was. Here we see that the subconscious has perceived a certain fact which the conscious mind did not notice. For long it was thought that this power signifies some supernormal faculty of the subconscious mind. But in most cases it is not necessary to suppose this, for, as the last experiment showed us, the subconscious mind takes in many things which the conscious mind does not, and only the most striking and interesting facts rise into consciousness. Of the thousands of events going on all around us every day, we perceive but a few. All the rest are ignored, though they are lodged within the great mental storehouse within us. The memory of the subconscious. The powers of the subconscious mind are indeed great. It forgets nothing, and facts which have entirely slipped from the conscious mind are retained within it, and may be recalled years later, or may suddenly flash into the memory of their own accord. They may come into the mind in the form of some simple thought or memory, just as any other thought or memory would, or they may come to us in more startling form. They may be, as we say, externalized, that is, projected upward from the subconscious into the conscious mind, forcibly and dramatically, as a bombshell might be exploded within it. In these cases, the thought may strike us as coming wholly from without, and not from within ourselves at all. One or two examples will make this clear. You have mislaid a book. You cannot remember where it is. The natural process would be to recollect. In the case of an individual who is psychic or mediumistic, the externalization may take more startling form. He may hear a voice telling him to look under certain papers upon the library table, and sure enough, upon looking there, the book is found. Or he may have a mental picture of himself leaving the book in that place. Or he may feel a hand gently pushing him in the direction of the table. Or he may see a figure standing before him and pointing to the hidden book. In all these cases, it is improbable that the voice, the touch, and the figure were real. That is, that they came from some spirit friend. They may have done so, but it is true that, in many cases at least, they are methods by which the subconscious mind externalizes or reproduces its hidden memories in dramatic form, just as they are reproduced in dreams or in visions of the crystal ball. The psychic diaphragm. The subconscious mind, therefore, may be looked upon as composed of a number of strata, like a layer cake, which are normally more or less separated from one another by a sort of psychic membrane or diaphragm which is impervious. At times, this psychic diaphragm becomes thinned. In that case, we remember our dreams of the previous night, or we have wonderful constructions of genius, the productions of musical prodigies, etc. The subconscious mind works out the problems, and the finished product is projected into the conscious mind in its completed form. That is why it appears to us so marvelous. On the other hand, if a part of the subconscious mind is diseased, as may sometimes happen, then we have hysteria, obsession, and insanity. It will be seen, therefore, that both good and evil may result from this thinning or puncturing of the psychic diaphragm, separating the conscious from the subconscious mind. If the mind be healthy and is kept so, only good will result. Psychic powers will be cultivated, and helpful advice will be given to the subject thenceforward. If, on the other hand, the mind becomes in any way deranged or diseased, then harm may result, and the individual may be sorry that he has ruptured this dividing diaphragm instead of preserving it intact. It is all a question of care, good health, good judgment, and a healthy psychic, mental, and physical life. Once this psychic membrane has been, so to say, punctured, it is very difficult to heal it up again, and great care must be exercised in developing these subconscious phenomena. We shall discuss this more fully, however, in the chapter devoted to obsession. The subconscious mind should be made our friend and not our enemy. We should train it carefully, for, though it is a good servant, it is a bad master. It should always be kept in check, and dominated and controlled by the conscious mind. When this is the case, all goes well. How the subconscious reckons time. The subconscious has, among other faculties, the power of reckoning time in a most remarkable manner. Many of my readers have doubtless conducted the following experiment for themselves. On going to bed, you have said to yourself, "Now I wish to wake tomorrow morning at 7 o'clock promptly because I have such and such a train to catch." There is no alarm clock in the house, but, promptly at 7, you awake. That this is no mere chance coincidence has been proven by a number of cases, which have been collected, and the fact has also been proven experimentally on hypnotic subjects. Thus, they have been told that in, say, 9,750 seconds, they would perform a certain action. Then they were immediately awakened. As soon as awake, they knew nothing of the suggestion which had been given to them, and nothing of the action they were to perform, and yet precisely in 9,750 seconds they performed the action in question. We see, therefore, that the subconscious mind has the faculty of reckoning time in a very remarkable manner, and this is but one of its mysterious powers. The subconscious rules the body. Another of its remarkable manifestations is the power which it possesses over the bodily organization. By means of suggestion, the pulse has been raised or slowed, the temperature has been elevated or lowered, the various secretions of the body have been altered, and many similar phenomena which are well known to anyone who has read upon this subject. One of the most striking cases, doubtless, is that of Mademoiselle Ilma X. A pair of cold scissors was applied to her chest, and it was suggested that these were red hot and that they were burning the flesh. In a few moments an angry red mark appeared, corresponding to the shape of the scissors, and the next day a genuine blister had been created which took several days to heal. Here we see the power of the subconscious mind in affecting the body, and even the local tissues, to a remarkable extent. If this is true, and the body can be harmed in this way, it can doubtless also be cured. We here enter the field of suggestion and psychotherapy, which will be treated more fully in Chapter 30. How to give your own subconscious mind suggestions. One of the best methods of treating yourself is by suggesting certain desirable things just as you are falling off to sleep. Thus, if anything is wrong with you physically, mentally, or spiritually, suggest to yourself, the last thing at night as you are falling to sleep, that all will be well, that the trouble will be removed during the night, that you will wake up refreshed and invigorated, that there be no pain, no unpleasant feelings or emotions in the morning, etc. Suggest, in fact, whatever you desire to have accomplished, and you will find that, during the night, this will have been effected, and that your bodily or mental ills will have disappeared as the result of your autosuggestion during the hours of sleep. Here again, we shall be enabled to see the remarkable powers of the subconscious mind brought into play and clearly demonstrated. Spirit messages and the subconscious. Now, these faculties of the subconscious mind explain a certain number of spirit messages which are received at seances. Let me illustrate this in the following manner. Just before leaving your home to join a circle, you glance at the evening paper. Your attention has been attracted to the leading articles. Apparently, you have seen nothing else. At the seance that evening, the name of a friend of yours is spelled out, and the announcement that this friend has been killed that day by falling from the 4th story of his residence. At first sight, this seems a very good test message, but on going home and again looking at your evening paper, you find a small article tucked away in the corner of the paper stating these facts. Therefore, probably what happened was this. Your subconscious mind perceived and took in these facts without their even rising to consciousness, and at the seance, they were given out either by yourself or by the medium who obtained them from your mind by telepathy. In this way, many messages have been explained and shown to be due to the workings of the subconscious mind, and not to spirits at all. We must, therefore, always be on our guard against these possibilities. The structure of the mind. The older conception of the human mind was that it was a single entity, an individual thing, a sort of sphere incapable of division. This was, in fact, one of Plato's main arguments for the immortality of the soul. Unfortunately, modern science has destroyed this illusion. We now know that the human mind is a composite and not a simple thing. To use a rough analogy, it has been proved that the mind is somewhat like a rope, composed of a number of strands twisted together. Under normal, healthy conditions, this rope remains one, the strands are united. But under certain abnormal states or conditions, these strands may be divided up into several groups, and they would all pull in different directions. What holds these strands together normally? First, good health. Then cheerfulness, attention, concentration, will, and an interest in objective things. What favors this disintegration process, this dissociation of the mind, as it is called? The exact opposite of all this, a rundown or fatigued condition, introspection, and particularly all continued subjective practices and the too passive attitude of the mind. If we lose contact with and interest in the objective world, if we go inside our heads and spin romances and dream daydreams to too great an extent, if we gaze blankly into space, thinking of nothing in particular, if we allow the mind to become too passive and do not exercise our intellect in a normal, healthy manner, this disintegration is likely to take place. The strands of the rope become separated, and then the mind may go to pieces, and spirit obsession and even insanity may result. How to heal a sick mind. Of course, this is only a crude analogy. The mind is not like a rope, and cannot be divided into strands in the same way, but it is an analogy which will help us. The only way to heal and restore a mind in this condition is to weave or weld together these separate strands and bind them up again into one solid, single rope, as it were. This may often be done by hypnotism, but great care must be exercised in doing this, for if it is not rightly applied by an expert operator, the mind may become still more disintegrated, and the last state of that man shall be worse than the first. Now, these separate strands of the mind, to return to our analogy of the rope, may form different selves. Each self may possess a certain identity and individuality of its own, and they may all pull in different directions. That is, they may all exercise their own functions and powers, and think their own thoughts. There is no one self anymore. It has gone to pieces. These various selves may alternate one with another in the same individual, and then we have those interesting cases known to us as alternating personality. If there are two of these, we have double personality. If there are three or more of these personalities, we have a case of multiple personality. There are sometimes 6 or 7 of these, and in one case, it was reported that there were 10, all in the same individual, all alternating with one another, all having their own prejudices, likes, dislikes, interests, points of view, and knowledge of persons and things. Many such cases have been cured by welding together several of these selves by hypnotic suggestion, when the original man was restored. The differences between spirits and subconscious selves. Now, if this be true, and it has been proved to be true by many well-authenticated cases, how distinguish these selves from true spirits? This is a very complex question which cannot be fully answered in this place, because we must understand, first of all, more of the nature of the subconscious mind and its powers. But one simple test can be applied, which is this. All these personalities, or parts of selves, derive their knowledge of men and things through the same source, namely the 5 senses. None of them can possibly know any fact which was not supplied to them through sight, hearing, touch, etc., so that if any of them manifest supernormal knowledge, this proves to us at once either that some external intelligence is present, or that this personality, whatever it may be, has acquired this knowledge in some occult manner, by telepathy, clairvoyance, etc. Which of these two interpretations is the correct one, I shall endeavor to answer in another place. Personalities created by hypnotism. It may seem incomprehensible to many how the human mind can become split up or dissociated in this manner. They think that this is rather a far-fetched theory, and prefer to believe the simple theory of spiritism, as applied even to the most simple facts. This might be admissible, but for the following consideration. We can trace a gradual series of intermediate steps, all the way from normal states of mind to these dissociations. In daydreaming and absent-mindedness, we see the first of these steps. When we hypnotize a subject, and suggest to him that he is Napoleon Bonaparte or Julius Caesar, and he enacts the part with due gravity, we can hardly suppose that Napoleon Bonaparte or Julius Caesar really returned to manifest through him. And should any be inclined to accept this view, it may be said that the hypnotic subject will just as easily carry out the suggestion that he is a lion or a bear or a bird flying in the air, and no one, we imagine, would contend that a lion or a bear or a bird really manifested at such times. So, therefore, we see that one part of the mind may enact a little comedy by itself, without the knowledge of another part, and from this simple fact, to the most striking phenomena of the subconscious, we can trace a definite chain of connection. The picture-forming faculty of the mind. One of the most striking powers which the subconscious mind possesses is its ability to reconstruct mental pictures or photographs of distant or imaginary persons. Your mind contains a whole picture gallery of all your friends, which you see, as it were, in your mind's eye. This is limited not only to your friends and relatives, but to heroes of books you have read, and even to imaginary personages. These pictures are not set and inert, but live and move, and we place the characters in various situations and cause them to move, act, and talk as human beings would do. Thus, suppose your friend A, or David Harum, or some imaginary personage, were thought by you to be on a journey. You would imagine them to be in various situations, and would picture to yourself precisely how they would act in each situation, and would put into their mouths arguments and conversations which they would carry on with those about them. This faculty which the mind possesses is a very peculiar one, and its functions are technically known as spiritoid functions. They have a great bearing upon spiritism. How dream personalities talk. These phenomena show us how easy it is for the subconscious to imagine that various personages are present, carrying on a conversation with us, etc., whereas, as a matter of fact, they are not present at all, but were invented by us. If, therefore, at a séance, some exalted personage appears and claims to communicate, we must always assure ourselves, first of all, that this personage is not one of these semi-conscious or subconscious creations, and must make him give proof of his own identity. This faculty of the mind is again seen in dreams. In dreams, we create situations in a similar manner, and imagine that other personages are present talking to us. We have long debates and arguments with such personages, and sometimes they beat us out. So you see how important it is to be sure that the intelligences which communicate at séances are not creations, but are really individualities, as they claim to be. How to distinguish true from false. How are we to prove this and make this distinction, you may say? The following is the first method. All our knowledge, whether it is conscious or subconscious, is supposed to be obtained through the 5 senses. The subconscious is built upon the facts obtained by means of hearing, sight, touch, etc. Now, if the communicating intelligence tells us many facts, as proof of its identity, which the mind of the medium never knew, we have fairly good proof of identity, or at least that the knowledge given was obtained by some supernormal means. But decisive proof is not yet obtained. We know that there are other methods of obtaining supernormal information, for instance, telepathy, clairvoyance, etc. Adding these powers to the subconscious faculties of the medium, we have often a difficult task to prove that the intelligence which communicates with us is really the personage it claims to be. Repeated questions must be asked, absolute proof of identity must be insisted upon, and in this way only can we be sure that we have passed beyond the limitations of the subconscious mind of the medium, and that we are really obtaining messages direct from the spirit world. Why and how spirits prove their identity. This proof of identity is really the great problem and the first point to solve. Let me make this plain. Suppose that a cousin of yours had disappeared 12 years ago. One day you receive a call over the telephone and a voice says to you, "I am your cousin, so-and-so. I demand my share of your uncle's will." Naturally, you would reply, "How do I know that you are so-and-so?" In daily life, it would be an easy matter to prove this. He could appear before you in his physical body and you could identify him, more or less easily in most cases. But suppose he were so placed that he could never see you personally. In such a case, how could he prove to you that he really was the person in question? He would have to relate to you a number of personal and detailed incidents in his past life, which he would be the only likely person to know, or relate facts which only he and you knew, or tell you things which you did not know, but which you afterwards found out to be correct. If you received a number of these replies, you would be right in concluding that he really was the person at the other end of the line, and this is the way in which spirits prove to us their identity. Until they do so, we can never be sure that the teachings they give are correct. If they succeed in proving their identity, we may then accept their word as to the conditions of the next life and other matters, since they were always truthful people in this life, and we have no reason to suppose that they are other than truthful now. How we obtain spirit messages through the subconscious. The subconscious is the channel through which we obtain spirit messages in nearly all cases. That is, they come through or by means of the subconscious mind, and it therefore assists the spirits to communicate. The spirit can manipulate or act upon the subconscious, while it cannot readily affect the conscious mind. This we can see ourselves in the following way. Many of us have noticed that just as we are dropping off to sleep, a forgotten memory has flashed into our mind. It could not find its way to our conscious attention while the latter was busy with the day's activities. But as soon as the conscious mind became passive, then the subconscious had the power to send up this memory or message of warning. It is the same in the case of spirits who communicate. They are only enabled to do so when the conscious mind is in abeyance, quieted, or abstracted, more or less completely, as in a trance. Then the spirit is enabled to act upon the subconscious mind of the medium, and, through it, to reach us still in the body. The subconscious is, therefore, the true medium or vehicle for the manifestation of discarnate spirits, and this will become more apparent when we come to consider the phenomena of trance, which will be dealt with more fully in a later chapter. End of chapter 4.